Hi there again, folks. So we're going to be talking today about serving your audience as a journalist. So we're going to be stepping back a little bit from the specific techniques and skills that are used in doing journalism to look a little bit at the overriding principles that guide how we serve our audience in journalism. And so we'll be looking at terms like objectivity and transparency and the nature of truth. And looking at how that then filters into what our audience expects of us and what the real responsibilities of journalists working in the field are. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know. So we've talked a bit about the mechanics of doing journalism, about the tools that you need, the skills that you'll need in collecting information to write a news story. I want to talk a little bit today about the broader purpose of journalism in terms of serving the audience and what the audience expects as far as truth and accuracy and concepts of objectivity and loyalty are concerned. The book tells us that journalists' first obligation is to the truth and that their first loyalty is to citizens. Now, these concepts are obviously closely connected, but I want to parse out just a little bit why I think that our obligation would be to the truth and our loyalty would be to citizens if we were working journalists. In order to have a loyalty to something or someone, we usually refer to being loyal to a person or some animate object. We might be faithful in our work ethic or responsible for our obligations. But when we talk about loyalty, generally there's an interpersonal dynamic there. Whereas obligation carries a bit more of a context of duty. So we could think of the first obligation or first duty being to tell the truth, and that it's because journalists have a primary loyalty to the citizens, to the people that are reading their website or watching their news video or whatever it might be. Now, let's consider the question here for a moment of, is it possible for a journalist to be objective? Now, many people will say no, it's not possible for a journalist to be objective. They will hold an opinion. It's only natural that people have opinions about things, and a journalist is never going to be able to be truly objective, and their writing or their work is going to be colored by those opinions. And that's a fair point philosophically speaking. I might also pose the question, however, of whether we think it's possible for a scientist to be objective. And many people would offer the same argument that no, scientists have preferred hypotheses that they're looking to confirm in their research or to disprove someone else's hypothesis. But I think at the core, many of us would say that scientists, generally, at their best at least, are trying to unearth the mysteries of the natural world in such a way that reveals the world as it actually is, not to necessarily confirm what they believe or don't believe. And that the method that they use and the approach that they use is constructed so that they can try to be as objective as possible. And that same principle really applies in journalism. However, in recent years, objectivity has become misunderstood as a goal instead of a process. And so objectivity has never really been intended to signify that a person, whether he be a journalist or a scientist or whatever profession, that a person is without bias. But rather, it's exactly because people have biases that the need for objectivity arises. That it's a process of weighing the facts carefully and sifting through the information and testing the information so that the truth of the matter can come to the surface. And so objectivity really was intended in journalism as a process of helping to keep the natural human biases of a journalist in check. And so the book tells us on page 79 that in this vein of objectivity, the essence of journalism is a discipline of verification. And so journalism requires that whatever our personal preference on a matter might be, or our personal opinion on the matter might be, that the essence of journalism is a discipline of testing the facts that we receive, verifying the information to see whether a particular perspective or a particular narrative about any given story is the correct one. So objectivity is a process that includes verification that allows us to keep our biases in check by making sure that we closely consider our facts and bring them under the highest scrutiny possible. And now in the era of digital media, there are sites and organizations that are specifically dedicated to fact-checking, that they take claims that are being made out there, oftentimes by politicians or leaders in social circles of various sorts, but to research those claims and then to make an assessment on the factual accuracy of whatever the statements are or whatever the claims are. A few examples are PolitiFact, which came out of the Tampa Bay Times newspaper, or the Washington Post Fact Checker, or the Annenberg School's factcheck.org. These are all just a few examples of sites that have appeared in the age of digital media that allows the news consumer to go and to find out from someone who's researched the claims that are out there what level of confidence they can have in these statements. When a politician makes a particular campaign claim, these fact-checking sites will dig into the background of those claims and the facts of the particular topic, and then provide a snapshot judgment on the facticity of that information. PolitiFact does it by what they call the truthometer, which ranges from true to what they call pants on fire, where, as you might imagine, it's a total lie or total falsehood. The Washington Post fact checker does it by what they call Pinocchios, and so something that is less accurate would get more Pinocchios than something that was more accurate. So again, it's an opportunity for the news consumer to be able to have a resource available at their fingertips to check the facts and the claims that are presented by various leaders in the community or various newsmakers. But you know, when we start talking about accuracy and truth, a question similar to the question of objectivity arises, in that we oftentimes want to say, well, is it possible to know the truth? And of course, there have been questions of philosophers for ages, since antiquity, right, that have asked the metaphysical questions of, absolute truth. What is absolute truth? Can we know absolute truth? Can we agree on what the absolute truth is? And that's a fun intellectual exercise. But when it comes to journalism, what we're really concerned with is what we call functional truth. And this is the facts as we know them, right? That we don't have to get off into the weeds of deep philosophical contemplation about the nature of truth with a capital T to determine whether or not a grocery store is coming to our community, right? Or physics is a discipline of functional truth to help us understand the mechanics of the natural world. Or grammar, right? Grammar is not an absolute truth. It's a convention that a particular language adopts to set rules and standards for what is, say, proper English or proper Mandarin or proper German or whatever the language might be. But when we talk about these issues of real life events, we're not concerned about the overall metaphysical questions of religion or spirituality or philosophy. We're just trying to present an accurate portrayal of the facts as they occur. To the extent that we can agree that a car accident did in fact occur, or that Ted Cruz did in fact announce his run for the president, or the decision by a local energy company to raise rates. These are matters of functional truth that we can say pretty confidently did or did not occur. So that's what we deal with in journalism, is functional truth. And so journalism is a business of presenting accurate functional truth. Again, accuracy is key to maintain your credibility as a journalist and the trust of your audience, so that they will keep coming back to you to get information about what's going on in the world. Now, connected to all these discussions about objectivity and accuracy and what is truth, is also a question of transparency. That is, how open and honest, how transparent are journalists willing to be about their specific biases? And so sometimes you'll hear the people pose a question of, would you rather get your news from journalists who present the news objectively, or from those who are transparent about their biases and present the news from that perspective? And so we might consider the contrast of Rachel Maddow and Bill O'Reilly, one being a news show host for MSNBC and the other for Fox News. And so those would be examples of what we might consider partisan news organizations, partisan journalists who are very transparent, right, about their biases. They're coming at it from a particular perspective, and they're letting everyone know that. As opposed to, some people would conceive of something like C-SPAN as being purely objective, right? It's just sort of providing video footage of government as it occurs. And of course there's other things that occur on C-SPAN, but we might sort of think of transparency versus objectivity in terms of those kind of two poles, right, of extremes. But the fact of the matter is that transparency and objectivity do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can both apply an objective approach in your journalism. You can seek to test information as honestly and fairly as possible to verify the facts that you receive and confirm the information as you understand it. But then also be open and honest with your readers about where you may have potential biases, right? So that's sort of keeping ourselves in check, or a journalist keeping him or herself in check, where recognizing where the potential for bias may be to creep in, and at the same time saying, despite my personal feelings on the matter, right, I'm trying as much as possible to be objective and fair in my approach and consideration of this topic. And then there's also cases in which perhaps those admitted biases are too great to really create a sense of trust and credibility among your audience for the reporting that you do. If, say, someone is the CEO of Pepsi and they want to write a story about some merger that Pepsi is having with some other beverage company, that would be what we'd call a conflict of interest, right? And even if they were transparent about that, an audience might have a hard time swallowing, no pun intended, the idea that a CEO of Pepsi could be objective about this high-profile business deal. But in everyday normal reporting, it is possible in many cases for a journalist to be both objective in their approach but also transparent about potential conflicts of interest. So all of these discussions about objectivity, functional truth, transparency, avoiding conflicts of interest, all of these discussions point to the idea that journalists seeking to serve their audience do so by determining content not by market forces, but by the primary purpose of journalism to provide citizens with the information they need to be free and self-governing. People need accurate information to base their lives on, an accurate understanding of the facts of the world around them, what's going on in the world, so that they can make informed decisions. It's not a matter of whether or not newspapers or magazines will sell more or broadcast news stations will increase their ratings. It's will this information contribute to an accurate understanding of the facts of the world in my audience's minds, and will it contribute to a greater social civic discussion in the democratic process.